Hi, Deacon Ron here. Welcome to Elijah's Fire. I'd like to continue my reflections on the mercy of God, and I want to do this by reading the parable of the woman who anoints the feet of Jesus. This is found in Luke chapter 7, verse 36 to 50. It begins, "When one of the Pharisees invited Jesus to have dinner with him, he went to the Pharisee's house and reclined at the table." The Pharisees were well known in the time of Jesus for their very strict observance of the Jewish commandments. Reclining at table, they would rest with their heads and shoulders facing the table and their feet facing away from the table. A woman in that town who lived a sinful life learned that Jesus was eating at the Pharisee's house, so she came there with an alabaster jar of perfume. Now there's two problems here. Firstly, back in the time of Jesus, women did not eat with the men. Women did not sit in public listening to Jewish rabbis' teaching. Secondly, it says she was a sinful woman. Now, it doesn't specify the sin. Could have been a sexual sin. Maybe she had a bad reputation in the town. Maybe she was a prostitute. We don't know. But being a sinner identified her as being displeasing to God, as God not liking her, as having God's disapproval. As she stood behind him at his feet weeping, she began to wet his feet with her tears. Then she wiped them with her hair, kissed them, and poured perfume on them. This is an amazing act of intimacy. No other person in the New Testament shows Jesus such physical intimacy as this woman. It's quite amazing. And you can imagine what the Pharisees were thinking when they were watching this. When the Pharisee who had invited him saw this, he said to himself, "If this man were a prophet, he would know who is touching him and what kind of woman she is, that she is a sinner." So the assumption the Pharisee is making is that this woman's a sinner, God hates sinners, and if Jesus is a so-called prophet of God, he should also hate sinners. He should be displeased with this woman. He should be offended by her presence. He should be angry with her, whatever. But Jesus instead jumps to the woman's defense. Quite amazing. Jesus answered him, "Simon, I have something to tell you." "Tell me, teacher." Two people owed money to a certain moneylender. One owed him 500 denarii, the other 50. Neither of them had the money to pay him back, so he forgave the debts of both. Now which of them will love him more? Simon replied, "I suppose the one who had the bigger debt forgiven." "You have judged correctly," Jesus said. Then he turned toward the woman and said to Simon, "Do you see this woman? I came into your house. You did not give me water for my feet, but she wet my feet with her tears and wiped them with her hair. You did not give me a kiss, but this woman, from the time I entered, has not stopped kissing my feet. You did not put oil on my head, but she has poured perfume on my feet. Therefore I tell you, her many sins have been forgiven, as her great love has shown. But whoever has been forgiven little loves little." Amazing. So we see that Jesus acknowledges her sin. He's not some 1960s hippie into free love. He admits, he says, that she has committed sin. But he turns it around. He says, who is going to love the doctor more? The person who has been healed of a scratch on his knee, or the person who has been healed of cancer? Obviously the person who has been healed of cancer. He says this woman who has committed many sins has been forgiven much, and because of that she loves much. Her sin has opened her up to the mercy and forgiveness of God. Now this is not the usual approach to sin taken by most people. The usual approach is we sin, God gets angry with us, and God punishes us. What Jesus is saying is we sin, we ask for forgiveness, we receive forgiveness, and that forgiveness and mercy leads us to love of God, leads us to a deeper, more intimate love of God. This is Christ's victory over sin. Satan wants to use sin to condemn us, to make us feel guilty, to make us feel shame, to make us feel that God hates us. Christ, on the other hand, uses what we are most shameful of, our sin, to lead us to a greater love of God. God takes the death that is our sin and transforms it into the new life of love of God based on his mercy and compassion. So what Jesus is saying is that if we bring to him the water of our sin, he will transform it into the wine of his mercy, love, and compassion. So the sinner who is aware of his sin, and we saw this last week in the parable of the Pharisee and the tax collector, the person who is aware of his sin has a spiritual advantage over the person who thinks he is all good and holy and not in need of God's mercy and compassion. So then Jesus said to her, "Your sins are forgiven." The other guests began to say among themselves, "Who is this who even forgives sins?" Jesus said to the woman, "Your faith has saved you. Go in peace." So through faith, we bring to God our sin, and through faith we receive his mercy and forgiveness. We bring to God the dead wood of our sin, and he uses that wood to light the fire of his mercy and compassion. And the more logs we bring to him, the greater the fire, the bigger the fire, so that in the end it can fill the whole world with its warmth and light. Thank you for listening.